Donald Trump's administration is lying to you. Good afternoon. There have been a lot of conflicting reports and rumors today about the cuts issued by the Trump administration last night to programs that affect average Americans. I have spent last night and today speaking with leaders in Washington, local elected leaders, nonprofit organizations, and my agency heads to make sure that we are doing all we can to stand up for working families and the most vulnerable people in our state who are affected by these cuts. The United States Constitution clearly states that Congress has the power of the purse and sets laws to obligate federal funding for all 50 states. What Donald Trump tried to do in the last 24 hours is illegal. Let's be clear. This is a demonstration of cruelty against people who depend on us, working families who rely on federal assistance to pay their rent, people who need help paying their utility bills, parents who need critical programs like Head Start for quality, affordable childcare, and 3.5 million Illinoisans who get their health insurance through Medicaid. Despite what the White House press secretary said at the podium earlier, I believe it is my duty to report to you the truth of what actually happened today in Illinois. Donald Trump's administration is lying to you. The White House's attempt to walk back what they did today does not match what we saw on the ground. They assured us that Medicaid would not be affected. That was a lie. Our state agencies were unable to access the Medicaid system until an hour ago, preventing payments for services. And this has been reported from states across the nation. When we reached out to federal agencies, they informed us that they have been directed not to discuss any guidance with states. They have canceled previously scheduled meetings for this week. The White House assured us that Head Start would not be affected. That was a lie. Providers across the state experienced outages, and some were unable to make their payroll. They assured us that they were doing nothing to take away individual assistance from the most vulnerable people in our state, but they refused to say that they would restore LIHEAP, the Low-Income Housing Energy Assistance Program, payments to support the unemployment system, and Meals on Wheels. These are programs that hundreds of thousands of Illinoisans depend on: children, seniors, veterans, working parents. Let's just be clear about what happened over the last 24 hours. At 7:42 p.m. last night, we saw a memo from the White House saying that they were pausing federal funding across the board. This morning, along with all 50 states across the country, we discovered that our ability to access critical federal funding had been cut off. And now the administration would like us to believe that these were just coincidental website outages. Donald Trump and his administration have not earned the benefit of the doubt. They are either lying to us or they are critically incompetent. This is what happens when you staff the federal government full of Project 2025 contributors that don't have any experience governing and don't think that the laws apply to them. The consequences of their actions are not hypothetical. They are not numbers on a spreadsheet. These are real people, ordinary Americans struggling to afford groceries, rent, and health care. Donald Trump promised to lower prices for average Americans his first week in office. Name one thing that he's done to accomplish that. Prices have gone up, not down. Let me say this in no uncertain terms. What the president is trying to do is illegal. Let me say that again. What the president is trying to do is illegal. I know these are challenging times, and the Trump administration is trying to confuse the American people. That's why it's so important that we speak plainly. I was very happy to hear as I entered this room today that an administrative stay has been granted. Let me assure you, the state of Illinois will fight this unlawful order with everything we have. We're working with the Attorney General, who has moved forward with other states to continue pursuing legal action to protect the people of Illinois. Last November, on the day after the election, I made a promise to the people of Illinois. When it comes to threats to our freedom, health, or security, if you come for my people, you come through me. And with that, I'd like to introduce our Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton.
Hello, everyone. I am deeply disturbed by the actions that bring us together. The Trump administration has made an unquestionable declaration of where their values lie. This is an attack on the nation's most vulnerable populations to cut seniors off from food or strip access to health care from critical patients, is a display of cruelty driven by the values of this new administration. If it feels like you are being asked to subscribe to a nation fueled by hate over hope and retribution over problem solving, you are not imagining things. Whatever you are feeling right now is justified. And because the actions taken today do not respond to the very real needs of everyday Americans, you're going to hear a lot of noise. Hear me when I say, no amount of backpedaling can override the truth they just dropped at our feet. This dizziness, this nausea, the panic, it's all intentional. It is not a mistake that websites are suddenly going dark just as people start to ask questions. This level of chaos was intended when President Trump and the people in his ear made these decisions. Let's stop ourselves from thinking in numbers and start thinking of faces. A family relying on federal utility support could go cold as soon as tonight. An expecting mother with an ultrasound scheduled tomorrow may still be wondering if Medicaid will cover that appointment. And a nonprofit in your community, meeting the needs of your neighbors, is about to conduct layoffs or close their doors completely. Someone you love will suffer because Trump's administration has chosen to trample on the United States Constitution and dishonor the promises made to the people who elected them. The comparison between what drives leaders across this country has never been laid out more clearly. Every year, since the Pritzker-Stratton administration stepped into office, we have clawed higher and higher out of the hole our predecessors dug. And year after year, Illinois has gotten stronger. Illinois is a resilient state, home to the most resilient people. We weather the harshest winters, and every spring we emerge more vibrant than we were at the first snowfall. But right now, we are standing in the middle of an Arctic blast, perpetuated by ego and a disdain for basic human decency. But we will not be buried, because we, your leaders, made a promise to stand up for each and every one of you, whether you agree with us or not. If you take nothing else away from today, take this. Donald Trump's administration has declared that their values are rooted in hate and the whims of a small few, but Illinois' values are rooted in compassion as we work to uplift every community and every person without discrimination. There is no hate in Illinois' heart. I cannot say the same for the White Houses. Elections have consequences, and they're playing out right before your very eyes. And with that, I'll pass it to Attorney General Kwame Raoul.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Last night, I had one of my staff members stay up most of the night drafting a lawsuit in conjunction with 4 other states who were contributing to the drafting of the lawsuit that will be filed today in Rhode Island. On behalf of Americans and all Illinois residents, I want to thank the governor and all the agencies that contributed to getting us the needed information for this action. The framers of our Constitution gave the power of the purse to Congress, not to the president. In our lawsuit, we allege that our Constitution, through the separation of powers in Article 1, Section 1, and through the spending clause, gives Congress alone the responsibility to approve the appropriation and spending of federal funds, including to the states. The executive branch does not have the authority under the Constitution or federal law to pause or impose conditions on federal funding when those actions are arbitrary and capricious or otherwise violate the law, including the Administrative Procedures Act. This freeze will have a devastating impact, as you've heard, but it will have a devastating impact on public safety, prosperity, and quality of life for all Americans, and certainly citizens in the state of Illinois. I want to state clearly that Democrats and Republicans alike will negatively be impacted by the pause in funding. It impacts our ability, our office's ability, to go after offenders who prey on our children, because it impacts our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. That task force has enabled us to capture a record number of child predators. Since 2019, over 900 child sexual predators have been arrested. In addition, the freeze impacts burn JAG funding that undermines the work that our law enforcement partners try to do to fight crime. It impacts our ability to provide for our veterans who have served our country. Head Start and child care programs, devastating blow to research conducted by our universities and research labs. It takes away critical support to operations for agriculture. And, we heard a lot about the price of eggs over the last few weeks. One of the things it impacts is the ability for inspectors to make sure that salmonella doesn't contaminate our eggs and creates a backlog. And Illinois is one of the major producers of eggs. So I don't want to hear Donald Trump talk about the price of eggs anymore. I don't know who's advising OMB on this act. I don't know if Dr. Phil is somehow embedded in OMB now. But I can tell you that on January 20th, we had a peaceful transfer of power. We had an inauguration, but it was not a coronation. Congress is given the power to appropriate. The executive branch cannot unilaterally disregard appropriations passed by a separate and equal house of government. While I am sincerely prepared to work with the new administration, as I did during the first Trump presidency, I will not stand silent while they try to impose unconstitutional mandates. And with that, I pass it back to the governor.
Thanks. Happy to take questions from members of the media. Yep. Olivia.
Governor, did you see any reports of actual patients who were affected by the Medicaid issue today, or was it just kind of between the governments speaking to each other? And at what point would it start to affect patients?
Let's step back just for a moment and let me remind you that nothing that came in the memo last night would indicate that all of a sudden you'd have the systems going offline. And yet that's exactly what happened, because they intend to make cuts to these programs. That's why they went offline. Don't let them fool you that there was some kind of website outage. That's not what happened. And so when does this affect people? Well, every day we access the Medicaid system to get reimbursed for people's services that they get from their doctors every day. $104 million is what we would have gotten today had we been able to access it on time. And so it does affect us, and it affects people's ability to access services. And let me remind you again that their intention was not to pull it back online today. It's clear, right? You think it's an accident that the memo came out last night, and then this morning our state agencies like Medicaid could not access those systems. It's not an accident. The intention here is to disrupt. The intention here is to make cuts, and it will affect people all across our state. Yeah.
Governor, how does
Tina.
this impact your planning for your budget this year, what you've seen so far?
Yep.
We're hitting 9. I'm sure that is there extra funding need for certain things, maybe more legal resources? How is it impacting that?
Well, as I've said, we don't know. We think that it may, and we're certainly thinking about how we will deal with that in the budget, but we don't know exactly. And that's one of the problems. Again, no communication. No communication. That memo actually wasn't to us, but it was posted online, so everybody could see it. And indeed, the actions that were taken today, no one was warned about. So we're not sure how we'll be affected, but we certainly are on guard.
You mentioned it's
Yes, Paris.
The judge has already put a stay on.
Yes.
Does that mean that all the grants, universities, and hospitals have to go back into action? Is everything back up and running?
Well, the concern, I mean, I'd like to turn it over to our Attorney General, but the concern is that when you've got, the efforts by the administration to cut those off, and then a temporary, this is only essentially a temporary restraint. There isn't a TRO, but it's a stay. We don't know when that'll be lifted. We don't know what the action will be. And if you're a university and you're planning on investing in research or laboratory work, right, do you start doing it now, not knowing if a week from now that temporary stay will be lifted? But I'd like to turn it over to the Attorney General.
That was actually
My law degree came in handy.
exactly right on point. And let's be clear, we are not party to that action in the district court in Washington, and so we don't control what may go one way or the other with that. The action that we and 21 other states are joined into is in Rhode Island, and it is temporary stay, as the governor pointed out, and the unpredictability that's caused by this. And I can tell you, I started my day out at a higher education institution. Everybody's up in arms about this because you rely on predictability of what you will be able to spend throughout the year.
Yeah, and just to remind you that, if you're a doctor and you take Medicaid patients, which we want doctors to do, now you don't know if you're going to get reimbursed. And you don't know when that'll be lifted and when you're going to get paid. And we don't want to go back to the days of Bruce Rauner when people waited nearly forever to get paid.
Governor Pritzker?
Yes.
You stated-
You're in the wrong press conference room, aren't you? Haven't seen you here before. Welcome. Yeah.
You stated that Donald Trump has broken the law, and then you repeated that.
Yep.
You just mentioned that you are an attorney. Please tell me, what is the statute that he's broken?
Well, as I say, by the way, the court has recognized that he does not have the authority to stop what is a congressional mandate, a congressional law passed, signed by a previous president, been in law for many, many years, Medicaid, for example. He doesn't have the ability to stop them. So that is what's illegal.
Slightly off topic, but on the topic of the illegals, there are over 400,000 illegal aliens, migrants in the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago. Many of them have committed crimes, have detention orders. Essentially, as long as I can remember, due to the sanctuary city and now the sanctuary state, and of course your Safety Act, essentially we have a revolving door of criminals committing heinous crimes, the most heinous of crimes. And I'm wondering, you were on CNN, you said that you wanted violent criminals to be removed from the state of Illinois. Are you going to hand over the list of repeat violent illegal alien offenders to Tom Holman?
To be clear, people who are being held in our jails and prisons, we do not have a record of if they are undocumented or not. We don't keep those records. Hang on, the judge, that is not how a court system works. That's not how a corrections system work. When a judge sentences somebody, they are remanded to the Department of Corrections. We have their name, the sentence, we have the offense that they committed, and we keep them in our prison. And by the way, you don't want us to let them out of prison. When they do finally get out of prison, if there is a warrant, or while they're in prison, if a federal official shows up with a criminal warrant to pick them up, we hand them over. That's how it works. Look, we have worked with the federal government for many, many years in the state of Illinois to apprehend violent criminals, criminals of all sorts. We have task forces that work between the Chicago Police Department, the state of Illinois, the state police of Illinois, federal officials at the FBI, for example, right? That we work together to take guns off the streets, to take drugs off the streets, to go after gangs, and we continue to do that every day. So that is work that continues, and you should go back and read the Trust Act because it doesn't say what you are alleging it says. Yeah.
Are you counting on several $1 billion worth of federal funding that is already kind of baked into the 5-year analysis that your administration put out in November? I mean, there's about $4 billion, each year that roughly you get from the federal government.
Yeah.
So with the deficit already projected, are you counting on that federal?
We're
funding?
relying on the law, which says that, no, I mean, really, this is every year, we know, this is the way we make projections. This has happened not just under Joe Biden or Donald Trump, but for many, many years in the past, right? If there is federal funding that is to come to the states, Medicaid is an example of it, we know what we will get from the Medicaid system when we submit those bills.
But given the uncertainty now, how are you planning on?
You can't. And as I said to Tina just a few minutes ago, we don't know exactly. We don't know what the impact on our budget will be. We're certainly trying to determine what contingencies we need to make. But right now, we're assuming the law will be followed. We're assuming the courts will follow the law. And so we've built that into the budget, but nothing more. Yeah, Shia.
Do you have like an action plan, knowing that this could be ongoing? Like, do you have a team looking at what happens if?
Well, this is less than 24 hours old, so I appreciate your giving us credit for being able.
This would be coming.
Not quite like this. This was literally, this memo that came out last night was something quite sweeping. Now, could you imagine that they would go after the programs that they're going after? Sure, but certainly not all at once, which is what they've done. And we've seen it across the country. I've talked to governors, I've talked to other federal elected officials. No one expected this. Yeah.
And can I ask you this, though? Other than legal challenges, what really can you do? As the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, elections have consequences.
Yeah.
And he has a majority in the House and the Senate. So other than complaining, what can you do?
Well, again, we can make sure that we're following the law, which we always do, and that the federal government is following the law when it comes to the state of Illinois. So that's most of what we can do. I think the rest is we've passed laws in the state of Illinois to protect people, and we'll continue to look for ways to continue to focus in on the things that are most threatened, and where they are threatened, we will take action.
Like discretionary funding?
Wait, I'm sorry, I want to get somebody who hasn't.
Governor, several of the
Yes.
nonprofits that rely on this funding have said that they've received questionnaires from the federal government asking very specific questions on how they use this funding, whether they use it to support the documented supports abortion. Should these programs, these leaders of these programs, should they be concerned? What message does it send that these types of questions are being asked of these nonprofits?
Well, first of all, I would ask the question, does the law suggest that the federal government has the ability now to impose new restrictions by virtue of the questions that may be asked? I don't know the answer to because I don't know which agencies you're talking about, but I do know that they should make sure that they have a good attorney. Unfortunately, I think what the Trump administration is doing is a full employment act for lawyers. And the fact is that we need to protect the agencies that are serving the people of Illinois, so we're going to do everything that we can in Illinois to protect them. Yeah.
Can you clarify, have you been in contact with the administration? Have they reached out to you? Have you reached out to them and just not heard anything?
I think I said earlier in my remarks that when our agencies reached out to the federal agencies, we literally were informed that they are not to speak with us. Yeah. Yes.
Can you explain how the Head Start program and the child care centers here in Illinois are going to be affected?
Yeah. So I don't know how they'll be affected in the future. I can tell you what happened today and therefore what could happen. Today, there were several agencies, Head Start agencies, that would not have been able to pay their payrolls. And indeed, one of them informed us that if they couldn't get paid by the end of the day, that they might have to close their doors and lay everybody off. So, look, we know from the pandemic that our child care system across the country is fragile. And if you take 1 day, 1 week, 1 month away from those payments, away from those agencies, they will likely close because they're on the edge. Remember, a lot of the agencies that provide these services don't have a balance sheet. So they don't have a bank account they can go to and rely upon while they're waiting to get paid. We saw that once again in Illinois under the previous governor when there were 2 years without a budget. We saw lots of agencies close and they sometimes never reopen. So the danger is very, very high.
Governor, can you talk about the impacts of higher education, how you're planning on watching out for it as soon as this does go through?
Again, we have contemplated what might happen, and I think you saw today that there were a couple of universities that have stopped some of the programs that they were planning to go forward with. Again, not because they were in violation of law, but because they've been threatened now by the President of the United States and his administration unlawfully. But they are concerned that, waiting for a judge to finally make a decision might be devastating for a university. So we're going to do everything we can to protect them, but there are some things, we cannot make up for billions of dollars of Medicaid that might be taken away from the state of Illinois. We cannot make up for hundreds of millions of dollars that might go to universities or might be taken away from our state universities. So I'm concerned, deeply concerned.
This will be the last question.
What is your contingency plan, though? I just really want to understand. We've got like 2 or 3 weeks left in the budget, so there must be something that you can tell us in terms of the steps that the state is taking to address some of this.
Look, you saw that that COVID-19 you couldn't plan for. And yet, months into a fiscal year, we had to make significant changes in our budget. We had to make cuts to deal with what we saw were deteriorating revenues to the state, right, because of COVID-19. We made $700 million of cuts to deal with that in 2020, 2021. We may have to do that in this budget, this coming budget, or in the current budget year. We just don't know. And so when you say contingency plans, it's not like there's some, magic money that's sitting in, buried under the governor's mansion or buried under the Capitol. There just isn't. We'll do what we need to do when the time comes, but we certainly are evaluating what that challenge might be and how we might overcome it. But I don't have an answer for you today. Again, 21 hours after we've been informed.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thank you.